Christmas is almost here and I need some Christmas presents, and my dad, he wants a sweater made out of wool, so I'm gonna make him one. So this is how you make a sweater out of wool. First step, you need a sweater that fits you or the person you want to give it to, and we're gonna measure it. So first thing we're gonna measure is the width. I have 36 centimeters in the length from here to here, which is 56, and then you're gonna measure from up here to the crotch is 26, and you're gonna take a double is 52, plus the length from up here until here is 55, and then you're gonna measure from here to here, which is 10. For the sleeves, you're also gonna measure. It's probably gonna be 10 too. Yeah, this is 10, and then this one is 4. So to look at this again, these are all the pieces we measured. Here are all the centimeters and the inches again. These are kind of the pattern pieces. So the ones that I had the 2 in, those pieces we're gonna have twice. And I'm gonna show you how we're gonna put them on the fabric. So these are actual pattern pieces now. And so the 2 big pieces, the sleeve and the back and the front, we're gonna put on the big fabric, on the wool fabric. So we have 2 pieces of each, but since the fabric is laid on top of each other, it's only 1 piece of each. So the length of the top in my sweater was 56 centimeters and the bottom was 55. We're gonna add 2 centimeters on each piece, so 4 centimeters in all together, and a little bit more just so we really have enough, and that's gonna be 120 centimeters for the whole fabric you need. Then for the rib knit, we're gonna have 2 pieces 22 centimeters for the bottom rib knit, and then 1 piece 22 centimeters for the rib knit on the sleeves, plus 1 piece 10 centimeters for the rib knit on the collar. So this is already with the seam allowance, and altogether this is gonna be 76 centimeters. If you're making a very large sweater, you have to make sure that the sweater pieces fit onto your fabric. So my fabric is 71 centimeters broad and my pieces are 52 centimeters at the broadest, so it fits onto it nicely. But if you're making a really big sweater, it might not fit and you might have to buy even more fabric length. So this is the fabric I bought. It's black and it's wool and it's really nice. So important for the fabric is that it's a knit sweater and not woven. So it has to be stretchy in both ways probably. It has to be a little thicker. It shouldn't be a jersey. It should be a nice quality. You could also for a sweater just use a sweat fabric, like for sweatpants. And then you need another fabric called rib knit. You're probably not going to find it in a nice quality like wool, so I just bought it in cotton, and it should be the same color. This is not exactly the same color, so I switched it out to a black one later, but you can see it's knit in a tube, and it's also knit and stretchy, and we will just use that for the rib knit on our sweater. So first thing I always do when I have a fabric is make sure the edges are lined up perfectly, and I pin them together so they don't slip around. Then you're gonna lay your sweater onto your fabric really nice and flat. Can you hear my cat purring? She's so cute. I missed my cat so much when I was in America. Anyways, so you gotta lay it out really nice and straight. Make sure the seams are all on top of each other so we can trace it. For tracing, I started at the collar, and we don't want to trace the rib knit. We only want to trace the bulk of the sweater. So I just folded it over. I don't know if you can see that well, but I just folded it over and then I just traced the sweater. The same thing by the sleeves. We're going to trace the sleeves and the top part separately. So when you're tracing the sleeves, you're just going to fold the sleeves over like this until you see the seam, and then you're going to trace where the seam is exactly. And the same thing on the bottom. We don't want to trace the rib knit, so you're just going to fold it over and trace a straight line on the bottom without the rib knit. No, this is getting a little harder. We need to trace the collar from the front part on the top fabric. So what I did, I took some pins, I stuck it in the fabric exactly where the seam was, and I folded it over, and I saw where the pin came out on the other side, and that's exactly where I made a mark. So I just made several marks going around, and that's where yeah, I hope you understand. For the straight line on the bottom, I can show you a little trick because you're probably not going to have a ruler this long, at least I don't have one. So I take my measuring band and I put it on the top, and then you can see in the corner of the frame that I put my knee on top of the other side, and I just like stretched the things so it made a straight line, and then I just traced it. Super easy. Do not trace the second armhole yet though. Next step is to draw on the seam allowance. So I just use a ruler, and for seam allowance I use 1 centimeter. You could just use like 1/4 of an inch, that's about the same. And you just trace it all around the whole sweater, and on the collar you put some extra seam allowance on the inner collar and the outer collar. So just like here you can see it's the outer and the inner collar because we're only gonna cut out the outer collar first. And just keep doing that all around the sweater. Then you can start cutting out the length and the whole side where you did trace the armhole, but not the collar yet. So now cut out the half of the outer collar. You can't see what I'm doing. I'm so sorry. I need to set up my camera better next time. But you cut out the half of the outer collar, and then you can fold your whole sweater over like this, and you can cut out the other side so both sides are exactly the same. So you traced it, and now you're gonna put your sweater exactly where you traced it so you can see, but it's not gonna be exactly the same, and that's totally fine. That's why we're doing this, so it's actually the same size. So now we're gonna cut out the collar for the front part of the shirt. So take the top fabric, only the top fabric and not both, and cut out what you traced with your seam allowance, and only cut out half, and then fold the pattern over again and cut out the second half so it's the same again. Now you have your pieces cut out, and normally when you buy fabric it's the right side together on the right side. So now I'm gonna mark the left side because on my fabric it's not obvious which one is the left side and which one is the right side. So I'm just making a cross so I will know, and then you should be left with 2 pattern pieces, one with a lower collar and one with a higher collar. Now to create the pattern for the sleeves, this is honestly probably going to be the hardest part because we can't just trace the pattern of the sleeve, like that's really hard. So you're going to measure from the top of the sleeve to the bottom of the sleeves, not including the rib knit, and you're going to place it onto your fabric and draw a straight line there. This exactly that long. Here you can see again, I'm using my technique with my knee. It works perfectly fine. Like really, you don't need a long ruler at all. You can just do this. It's perfect. Now you're going to turn your sleeve so that you have this seam on top, and then you're going to measure from this seam, from the armhole down to the rib knit again, and you're going to draw that line, and it should be a little shorter. Then you're going to measure the width exactly above the rib knit, and you're going to take that double on each side. I had 15 centimeters, so I went 15 centimeters onto the right side and 15 onto the left side. Now you're going to lay out your sleeve flat and in a 90-degree angle to the upper part of the sleeve. So where the shoulder is, you're going to measure how wide the sleeve is from your armpit to the other side where you have the 90-degree angle. I think I had 26 centimeters. Then you're going to make another 90-degree line on the lower measurement, and you're going to go the 26 in each direction like we did on the lower sleeve with the 15. Then you're going to connect the lower part of the sleeve with the upper part of the sleeve again with the same trick with our knee. So you don't even need a long ruler, I told you. If you want to be a real perfectionist, you're going to draw this line right here. So it's about 1 centimeter next to the original line, and it's just like a little curve to the inside. It just makes it fit nicer, but you don't have to do it. Like it will look fine if you don't do it too. So decide yourself. Do the same thing on the other side, and then we're gonna do the hardest part of it all, and that's the upper part of the sleeve. Draw a curved line like this on one side. It should look like the inner, like the last line I drew. And if you want to, you can put your sweater on top of it to kind of see what the line should look like, but it's not going to be exactly the same because it's sewed into the sweater already. Then you can start cutting out the one side where you drew the line with seam allowance. I am using 1 centimeter again. You can use 1/4 of an inch. And only cut out like half so we can fold it over again and then cut out the other side so both sides are even. That was hard. I hope you understood what I was saying and I hope you could follow along, but this is what it should look like now. These are your sleeves. And same things apply here. We want to know which one is your left and our right side, so we make a cross on the left side. First thing, we're going to sew their shoulders, so just pin them together and then sew them. For sewing, I'm using an overlock machine, but if you don't have that, just use a regular sewing machine and use a zigzag stitch because that's stretchy and the stitch won't rip. Next step, I made a mistake already. Ha 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 ha, who would have thought? I always make mistakes, and so do you, and that's totally fine. So if you use this normal sewing machine, just cut the threads and unrip it. And if you use an overlock, it's gonna be a pain in the butt to unravel it. So I just use the scissors and cut like right next to the stitch, and it won't be that bad. So open up your sweater with the right side facing you and the left side facing the table. That's why we made the crosses. Then you pin the middle of the sleeve to the shoulder seam, and then you just pin the other edge first, and then you just pin across. This is kind of hard, not gonna lie, but you just gotta pin around and wiggle it around, and it's gonna fit eventually. You do the same on the other side, and then you're just gonna sew them together. That's what it should look like on both sides. And now we're gonna fold it over. We're gonna put right side onto right side so that the left side is facing us and the left side is facing the table too. And you're exactly gonna pin the seams together, like exactly. This is important. I mean, if you don't put it exactly, it's just not gonna look as nice. But for me, this is really important too. So pin it exactly. And then just pin along the sweater seam and the sleeve seam and sew it. Now it's kind of already a sweater, but we're not finished yet. Now is the time for the rib knit. So take your other sweater and measure the rib knit. For me, on the collar, it was 3 centimeters. So then you take your rib knit, and 3 plus 3 is 6. And then you take plus 2 centimeters is 8 centimeters, and that's how broad the rib knit for the collar is. You're gonna find the middle of the sweater on the collar, and then you're gonna go 1 centimeter to the left and 1 centimeter to the right. That's the overlapping part, so it looks nicer. Then you're gonna measure out the collar, not exactly on the edge, but 1 centimeter away from the edge, because that's where the seam is gonna sit. My whole collar circumference turned out to be 58 centimeters. Now here's a little math problem for you. I know you love me, but look. So if you have the circumference without the seam allowance, and you're gonna subtract 10%, so minus 10%. So 58 minus 5.8 is 52.2, and now you're gonna add 2 centimeters for seam allowance, and that's how broad your collar is. I used a little less, which was a mistake, so use the 10%. Fold your collar in half and pin exactly in the middle, and then pin exactly in the middle on the collar, on the sweater, and the front and the back. Then pin the collar to the sweater so it comes out of the sweater like this, so it looks like that. Then pin the middle of the collar where you have a pin to the back of the sweater where you have a pin. Those should align. And then pin the front, like the last piece again, so it fades away into the sweater. Lastly, just pin all around the collar while stretching the collar to the sweater, and then sew it. To make it easier, I sewed the front overlapping part just with the normal sewing machine just to secure it, and then I sewed the rest with the overlock machine. While sewing it, make sure you stretch the collar so it's fitted with the sweater. And that's what it should look like. I hope you made it. It wasn't that easy, but it looks nice now. This is what you got so far. I'm sorry it's all black and you can't really see anything. But yeah, it's looking good. It's looking cute. It's kind of scratchy because it's real wool, but my dad will hopefully love it. He better, because I put a lot of work into this. Next, we're gonna measure the width of the rib knit, and we're gonna take a double plus 2 centimeters. I had 24 centimeters. Now measure up the length of your rib knit plus 2 centimeters, which should be, in my case, 22 centimeters, but I didn't have enough fabric, so I'm using less. And then you can keep measuring up 22 centimeters because we need some more for the rest of the rib knit. You can measure out how long the rib knit on your sweater is, but normally 2 panels should be enough. So just measure out 22 centimeters in total 3 times. Now measure the 24 centimeters, and that's for both of your sleeves. You can cut that out and then cut through the sides so you have 2 pieces. Mark the left sides as always on all the pieces. Then you can cut through the other panels on the side and then cut them apart so you have 2 long stripes. Measure the length of the rib knit on your sweater again, and that's how long we're going to make the stripes. plus 2 centimeters. In my case, that's 58 centimeters. Take half of it, measure it on your rib knit, and then just cut it off. For the sleeves parts, take them apart, put them together right side on right side, and sew along the edge. For the other ones, take them apart and put them on top of each other right side on right side, and sew along both sides, like every edge. Sorry you can't see, but what you do is you pin where the seam is, and then you fold it so the seam is on one side, and you pin the other side, and then you put the pins onto each other and pin on the other two edges. So you part the whole circle into quarters, and you do the same thing on the rib knit. So you fold the rib knit over and you do the same thing. Then you put the rib knit inside of the sleeve while the sleeve is turned inside out, and then you just sew together while you stretch the rib knit. With the other rib knit, you already have the side, so you put the seam onto the other seam, and then you put, so it's in half, so you put the pins in each other side. Oh, and you fold it over, and then you put the, like, you just make it into eighths. You do the same thing with the bottom of the sweater, and then you just pin the pins onto each other, and it's not gonna fit perfectly. You gotta stretch the rib knit while sewing. It's finished, and I think my dad will love it. Actually, it's cute. I'm gonna try to do an outfit with it so I can film the B-roll and take some pictures for Instagram. God, this sweater is so fucking warm. I'm heating up, and normally I'm freezing in my room because my room is freezing, but now I'm so hot. So a wool sweater.